very, very hard because we're running out of time.
Hello, how are you?
Right? Is there any money behind that report? If we haven't spoke to the company the way you seem to have spoke to the media.
Listen, guys, from up in Iowa, we folks seeing sympathy from absolutely, and that's wonderful, that's great. But we need something concrete here because we're starting to panic. And money we're all out of work. And it's not just us. What comes to this ship, we're running to thousands of jobs this creates every time we run a contract, and that's brilliant. That's good for everyone.
We know that, and that's why we pushed very hard.
All right, folks, do you want to move the microphone just? Okay, is everybody?
Right, everybody happy? So we've had a good engagement with the Prime Minister. We did, of course, speak to him about the three issues that I've spoken about today earlier on in relation to strengthening the Union, delivering on Brexit, and of course restoring devolution back here. Devolution should have been up and running, should never have been brought down by Sinn Féin. We regret that deeply. We have indicated to the Prime Minister that we stand ready to go back into government again tomorrow without any preconditions, but that we understand that others do have preconditions, and we will continue to engage with them to try and bring about devolution for the people of Northern Ireland. And I know there's been a lot of commentary today from some of the other parties about our relationship with the Conservative Party, in particular around the confidence and supply agreement. Let me be very clear. We're not going to apologise for delivering an extra £1 billion for the people of Northern Ireland, for the fact that we have been able to help the health service, the education system, the fact that we are putting £150 million into a broadband system which has now been procured, the fact that we have helped with road infrastructure. Not any other party that has stood before you today has delivered one penny of money for the people of Northern Ireland. We have delivered that through our confidence and supply agreement, and we will continue to work for the people of Northern Ireland regardless of their background. Don't forget, this money goes directly to those people in services, through hospital care, and we think that that is something that should be celebrated and not denigrated in the way that it has been done today. We did, of course, take the opportunity to talk to the Prime Minister about Harland and Wolff and the situation that they find themselves in at present. We raised the issue of Wrightbus as well, a strategic company in Northern Ireland, and we will be continuing to work with the Prime Minister and his team to try and find solutions on both of those areas. The Prime Minister again reiterated the fact that he would never be neutral on the Union. We welcome that. He will, of course, be neutral on the administration of government here in Northern Ireland, but you shouldn't confuse the two. And today I've heard those two matters confused quite regularly. He'll never be neutral on the Union, and talk of a border poll, he told us, was not something that he would entertain. So we look forward to working with the Prime Minister in strengthening the Union. We look forward to working with the new Secretary of State in trying to find the restoration of devolution, and of course we look forward to working with him on delivering the votes of the British people in June of 2016 in delivering Brexit.
Could I just add that clearly we've had a number of discussions with Boris Johnson before he became Prime Minister, and this week here in Northern Ireland we certainly welcome him here and taking an early opportunity to engage with all of the parties in Northern Ireland. And also Julian Smith, the Secretary of State, we believe he will bring a focus on detail and will certainly help in the negotiations that lie ahead. In terms of what we have heard, as Arlene has said, about the confidence and supply arrangement, I hope that media and journalists will also question Sinn Féin then about whether they continue with their policy of wanting to be part of the next administration in Dublin, because if they criticise so heavily the democratic role, the role given to us by the people of Northern Ireland by electing 10 members of Parliament, if they criticise that so strongly as being contrary to the Good Friday Agreement, then clearly they will not want to have anything to do with a future Dublin government, which they describe as the co-guarantors of the agreement, or perhaps they are being somewhat selective in their approach to this particular issue. The confidence supply agreement is a matter for discussion on another day with the Prime Minister, and those discussions will continue in the coming weeks. But they are about delivery for all of the people of Northern Ireland on infrastructure, health, education, mental health, deprived areas, guaranteeing support for our farmers, securing the winter fuel allowance, non-means tested for all citizens of the United Kingdom who are senior citizens, and also on NATO defence spending and security for our country. These are all vital issues which we do not believe that Jeremy Corbyn would be able to deliver on in the same way as a Conservative and Unionist government in the current circumstances. So we will continue those discussions in the coming days, confident that we can get a good outcome for the whole of the United Kingdom and for Northern Ireland. And when people talk about a confidence supply agreement that is toxic and has poisoned the well, I think those people who have benefited in the health service, in our schools, in our infrastructure, where we're going to get broadband at the appropriate level across the province, and not least in the constituencies of Sinn Féin members who boycott and upset themselves from Westminster. Those are good things for the people of Northern Ireland. We're proud of those achievements, and we think we can achieve more going forward, and certainly Boris Johnson is very, very committed to carrying that forward. We look forward to those discussions.
Arlene
Thank
Foster, it looks highly unlikely that the EU will agree to abolish the backstop as it stands. If the UK leaves without a deal, are you prepared to accept the economic damage that could be done to Northern Ireland?
Well, I think what we're focused on at the minute is supporting the Prime Minister in trying to get a deal. You say that it looks highly unlikely. Of course they are going to say what they have been saying for 2.5 years, because they have never been tested before in relation to this issue. It is very clear that it is the backstop that has caused all of the difficulties with the withdrawal agreement, and therefore that needs to be the subject of focused negotiations to deal with it, and therefore we will support the Prime Minister in doing that.
Tommy Gorman.
I noticed you stated today that your party never campaigned for a no-deal Brexit, that you support a sensible Brexit.
Yes.
Well, can you explain to us in layperson's language, in the current political climate, given the arguments that are taking place, what a sensible Brexit would look like in your view?
Well, a sensible Brexit is a Brexit that recognises that neither the British government, the Irish government, or indeed ourselves here in Northern Ireland want to see a return to the borders of the past, or indeed want to see infrastructure on the borders. What we want to see is a sensible way forward that recognises that the whole of the United Kingdom are leaving the European Union, the Republic of Ireland are staying in the single market, and therefore we have to find a way of dealing with that. We can do that. I believe firmly we can do that, but there has to be a willingness on both sides to be able to achieve that.
I remember last week, I think it was, the Irish government published what would happen in the event of a no-deal scenario. And they made it very clear, and very welcome it was, that there will be no checks or controls or infrastructure at the border. We know that there are currently checks that happen in terms of immigration issues. We know that there are checks in terms of the police and security and all of that, but there will be no extra checks at the border. This can be done away from the border. So if that can be done in the event of a no-deal Brexit, then it gives us ground that there is the possibility of getting a sensible deal. But it will require let me finish the point. It will require both sides to reach an agreement. As Boris Johnson has said, the current withdrawal agreement is not going to go through the House of Commons. That's a reality, and therefore we have to face those real facts.
Nigel, sorry, John. Nigel was talking, and I was putting a question to him. Nigel, you worked in Europe. Your wife works as an MEP.
Yes.
You know how Europe works.
Yes.
How in God's name is Europe going to have two jurisdictions, one inside the European Union, one outside the European Union, and no border? Let's be realistic.
Well, there is,
here.
of course, there is a border. Of course, there's a border. We're not in the United Ireland. We have a political border, we have a fiscal border, we have a currency border, we have a VAT border, we have a security border. So clearly there will be borders, but the issue is how do you manage checks and controls so that there's no hard border? The Irish government have already made the point that that can be done away from the border, even in the event of a no deal.
And the McLaughlin.
Arlene, just to be clear, what is the party's policy now on the backstop? Is it that you want it totally scrapped like Boris Johnson, or are you staying with your previously stated position that you could live with a time limit?
Well, we've always said the fundamental problem with the withdrawal agreement is the backstop, and therefore it has to be dealt with. And now the Prime Minister said very clearly that he believes this withdrawal agreement is dead, and therefore the backstop is dead. So we have to find a different way forward, and that's what we need to do. And that's what we would support the Prime Minister in doing.
Does your position change on that then? Is it
No, the
what
position
now
hasn't
scrap?
changed because the withdrawal agreement has gone now. The backstop has therefore gone as well because it's a part of the withdrawal agreement. Therefore, we need to find a way to deal with those issues. And as I've said already, there are ways to deal with this issue if there's a willingness on both sides. And so I hope that Dublin will dial down the rhetoric and there will be a willingness to engage with our new Prime Minister. And we've seen Sinn Féin under huge pressure today. We've seen the way they've reacted to our Prime Minister coming to Northern Ireland and talking about strengthening the Union and restoring devolution and delivering Brexit. And we've all witnessed how that has went down with Sinn Féin, but they need to get real as well. And they need to recognise that this is part of the United Kingdom and therefore needs to leave the European Union, but we should do it in a way that does no damage either to the UK, the Republic of Ireland, our neighbours, or indeed the wider European Union.
Jordan Modes.
Did you hear a meeting last night with Boris Johnson? Anybody compromise the talks process gets done with the back up? How receptive was it your idea of a sensible Brexit rather than a crash?
Well, look, we talk to the government all the time at Westminster. We talk to the government all the time here as well about issues of concern to constituents. The idea that that would prejudice the talks process is quite frankly ludicrous and not in the real world of politics.
And that's why, Jordan, I took a little while to talk about the confidence and supply agreement. The supply agreement has been good for the people of Northern Ireland. You think to hear some people that it was some bad thing that had been visited upon the people of Northern Ireland. We have delivered an extra £1 billion for the people of Northern Ireland, which they wouldn't otherwise have if it were not for the relationship between ourselves and the current government. And as Nigel says, we await to see what happens in the Republic of Ireland if it becomes the case that Sinn Féin have enough votes to win the government.
David Blevins.
Realistically, Marty Foster, why would the DUP compromise on the issues blocking the restoration of the Wall government when your party is wielding the level of influence it does? Boris Johnson's government effectively depending on your survival.
Well, because we're a devolutionist party and we fundamentally believe in devolution, as you know, David, it was not us that pulled down the devolved administration. We want to administer in health and education. We want to see better roads. We want to see more tourists coming to Northern Ireland, more events like the Open happening here in Northern Ireland. So we believe in devolution. That's what we're all about. So of course we want to go back in again.
Thank you. Andy Bell, 5 News. Arlene Foster, are you really prepared to back Boris Johnson going for no deal, knowing all the damage it could do to your constituents?
Well, I think you've heard the Prime Minister say consistently that he's not taking no deal off the table, but he wants to find a deal, and he's focused on finding a deal, and we're here to help him to find that deal.
But if
Because
necessary, are you prepared to back him if it comes to
As
that?
I've often said, I sometimes wonder, have people ever been in negotiations when they take things off the table before you get to the end of a negotiation? Of course you keep it on the table. We're in a negotiation trying to get the best deal for the people of the United Kingdom. You don't take things off the table, and we've learned that for quite some time.
David Young.
Arlene, you noted that Sinn Féin have been talking about a border poll and a referendum. They're not the only ones talking about Irish unity. You'll note last week that the Taoiseach referenced the prospect of the union being weakened in the context of a no-deal Brexit. How do you respond to his comments?
Well, I responded to his comments by saying it's Project Fear Mark II from the Taoiseach. You will recall that he very crassly took a photograph from an old paper to the European Union and said he didn't want this to happen again on the border in Northern Ireland, and without even thinking of some of the victims who had been associated with that atrocity. So he needs to dial down the rhetoric, he needs to recognise the mandate of the Prime Minister, and he needs to engage. Unfortunately, he hasn't been engaging. We've tried to engage with him on a number of occasions around Brexit. Famously, he didn't take the Prime Minister's calls on one occasion, so he needs to get engaged and he needs to find a way.
But remember, the terms of a border poll are set out in the agreements that have been established. Now, Sinn Féin are always the first to point to the necessity of abiding by agreements entered into. And their argument in the border poll runs contrary to the agreements that have been entered into. The Prime Minister made that very, very clear to us today and to them, and will be in the coming days, that the conditions for a border poll are not met, and therefore, you know, those who advocated and talked it up are actually in breach of the very agreements that they say they stand by and want implemented by others.
So are you saying when the Taoiseach says that Liberal Protestants and Liberal Unions are starting to question whether they feel at home in Northern Ireland, that he's in breach of the Good Friday Agreement?
No, what I'm saying, that those people who call for a border poll are clearly in breach of the Belfast Agreement, and in that sense Labour are in breach of the agreement by talking that up. And the reality is that the conditions are not met, and those who create this hysteria about it are actually running contrary to the agreement. But I have to say, let's get real here. The idea that many unionists will turn around and vote for a united Ireland on the basis of the current developments, I think is something that is not reflected in the reality of people on the ground, not the people that we talk to. We've had elections. We're not short of elections here. We're not short of tests of public opinion. I think we've had 4, 5, 6 tests in the last 3 or 4 years alone. Some of the biggest turnouts for unionist parties during that, and some of the lowest votes for nationalist parties. So we need to get a bit real here and realise that instead of creating an air of hysteria about all of this, we need to get Stormont up and running. We need to get Brexit delivered in a sensible way. And we need to continue to work with the government as far as we're concerned and strengthen the union. And in that regard, I do welcome the fact that Boris Johnson has made himself Minister for the Union, created a unit within 10 Downing Street, and we'll be working very closely with them on that issue.
Ms Foster, just to put a comment here from...
haven't been met. What are the conditions for a border poll? What are they? Well, they're very clearly set out in the Belfast Agreement. It says if the Secretary of State is of the belief that the majority of people in Northern Ireland would vote for a united Ireland, then he would call a border poll. It's very clear. It's in the Belfast Agreement. What does it look like? It looks like...
Look at the election.
Yes, exactly. And at the last election, I think you'll find that only 36% of people voted for Nationalist Party.
Ms Foster, just to put a comment here made by Sinn Féin leader Mary McDonald earlier, she said that Boris Johnson needs to ensure he's not the DUP's gopher and that he's mollycoddling you. Is he mollycoddling the DUP?
Well, I don't feel mollycoddled at all. I think it's highly pejorative and actually quite offensive when the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom comes to this country, and that's the sort of reaction that he gets from Sinn Féin. Not surprising, I have to say, not surprising at all, given some of their commentary today. But look, Sinn Féin's under pressure. We recognise that. We've seen the hysterical reaction to the fact that we actually had dinner with the Prime Minister last night. My goodness, what a shocking thing to happen in a place where we have a confidence and supply agreement with the Conservative Party. They need to calm down. They need to focus on getting devolution back. That's what I'm focused on, and I hope that they are too.
Was there anything from today's meeting or from other recent engagement with the parties that would persuade the EU to take a strategic decision to do a deal which you think get back into government sooner, or is it your intention to leave it till after October 31st?
Engagement talks. We've been engagement talks all throughout July. We intend to engage in talks this afternoon again in terms of getting devolution back. We're very clear that we want devolution back in a fair and balanced way. That's all we ask for. That's all we ask.
We're actually sort of hearing different sort of soundings, some of them are optimistic, some of them pessimistic, but that you are very close to a deal. There's quite a lot on the table that both parties could go for. Is it going to happen?
Substantial talk process ongoing at this present time. There are still gaps between us on certain issues. They need to work hard. Not to the point in saying it should be focused on now.
Last question, Liam.
Arlene, the Dublin are there behind you looking down on
Yes,
you guys.
good Anglican, yes.
Yeah. Let me just ask you a question. If you could hide an Anglo-Irish Act in any deal with Sinn Féin, would the deal be done?
Well, let me say this to you, Eamon. If we're going to do a deal, and I hope very much anything to disagree, because I think that's wrong. If you're going to do a deal, you should take ownership of the deal and say, this is what we want to do, and this is what we're going to do.
And is an Irish Language Act per se, is that a non-runner still with you?
Eamon, we're not going to talk about
No.
the ins
Why
and
not
outs
talk?
of the negotiations today. What I'm saying to you is there are substantial talks ongoing. I think that is good. We now need to find ways to close those gaps that are there and to bring about devolution.
Okay, folks.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
very much.